Matthew chapter 12. For this, I used the prompt Matthew chapter 12, and I put it into the Google Gemini custom chatbot that I've described in the preface video. Before I get started with this chapter for me is one of those big moments, one of those big first moments where the story of Jesus goes from being like the movie where everything is going great in the beginning and the good guys are gaining momentum and they're gaining support, and like it just looks like it'll just keep getting better forever. It could never go bad, to now, especially when you know how this story in particular ends, you get one of those moments of the sobering reality of where this really is going, and given what the story is about, it's very strange and it's hard to understand why the ultimate hero, like Superman, is saying it's going to end up like this. And we could go into a whole thing about what that means in the context of God becoming a human and doing that, doing all of this. But just in what this means as far as the call for followers of Jesus throughout all of history and certainly today, I think this is a moment where you need to reflect on this and realize all of the warnings that Jesus gives us throughout the gospel, saying that like this isn't going to be easy, and you will be hated, and people will try to fight you. It's not a result of other people not liking the good stuff that you do. It's a result of the evil in the world that is trying to stop heaven from coming into earth. That's why we pray that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I believe very strongly, by reading the hell out of all of this stuff, that at least a very, very, very prominent core key idea that Jesus wanted to explain to us, and then as like the main point for us to advocate going forward after his death and then ascension to heaven, is for his kingdom to come, is for heaven to come onto earth. And I'm not like breaking any intellectual ground here. This is, as far as I can tell, this is an extremely commonly held, at least in the more academic theological world, where the pastors and the priests and all of them are the books that they're reading that they then bring to people. But there's what I've noticed, a lot of like telephone game going on there, and the message really gets lost, or it's not portrayed in the way that I think it was meant to be portrayed. And part of that is because it's very scary and it's very difficult. And when you are doing this, think about it like this. When you look at everything that Jesus told us about heaven, and just interchange heaven with God's kingdom, or God's government, to use a more modern term, with the way that Jesus described how God's country, God's government, God's kingdom works, heaven. If you had, as a world country, in the way that humans work, in the way that humans think, if you all of a sudden had a huge group of people that were polite, that were respectful, that were nonviolent, weren't causing, to quote some very famous civil rights leaders, maybe causing good trouble. If you had a huge group of those people all of a sudden start to try to bring heaven onto earth, I guarantee you it is going to ruffle some feathers, because the way that the earth works, the way that humans work, It's the taking from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil rather than trusting God. When we take from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that is us turning away from what God wants and deciding for ourselves what is good and what is evil. And it's not a thing that always ends up bad, right? Like humans, I think pretty independently of the scriptures, of following Jesus, of knowing God, have like figured out that killing for no reason is bad. I'm using very broad general things here. I can't back it up with like super strong facts, but I think for a long time in a lot of cultures that have no idea about any of this, most of them have figured out, you have bad people that get into the mix and that will kill for no reason and everything. But that's a good example. Like people have figured out, point to the atheists or whatever, like people have figured out on the whole, killing for no reason is bad. We don't, maybe know why it's bad, but we've just decided it is, and you can pen any reason to it that you want. But is earning $1 billion bad? Some people would say yes. But if you say yes, that it's wrong to be a billionaire, then are you saying that you're pro government controlling how much money you can and can't have? That's where that conversation often leads to, where people will say, oh, so you're a communist, or, oh, so you XYZ. And if you try to explain to them that it's like, well, it's the concept that if you could get to that point, knowing that you're not sharing, you have far more than enough for what you need, and you're obviously not sharing it with the sick, the homeless, the imprisoned, the Matthew 25s, which we'll get to eventually, and that you're not using it to bring justice, to bring jubilee, for instance, which you absolutely could. And you can start to spin all of these theories about like, well, the freedom of blah, blah, blah. And, if you invest in this, then over time, you're actually going to create more wealth for people or whatever. All I will say is that has not proven to really improve things. That has not proven to bring heaven on earth. And we are charged to bring heaven on earth. So if we start to act in ways that will actively oppose the taking of knowledge of good and evil, which we have found leads to, trillionaires now, almost, I think, trillionaires, and continued poverty and starvation, and continued wars, and government corruption, and people dying because they don't have health care, and all of that. If we are continuing to make excuses for the world that we as humans create, taking the fruit from the knowledge of good and evil for ourselves, our own decision for what is good and evil, then we are not really following Jesus. Because Jesus came to be that I like to think about it, that initial story was follow God or follow yourself. We followed ourselves. And then you see Babylon was another echo of that. Then you can go to Moses, or sorry, not Babylon, or I guess Babylon is, but the Tower of Babel was what I was thinking of. You can think of Moses then coming down from the mountain with, the people are starting to veer away from God, and Moses comes down with the tree of life, God, on the tablets and throughout the law. And then Jesus comes and does it again and is showing us God again. And each of these times, it has been something that goes against what we think is logical, rational, feasible, But it doesn't matter, because if you believe and if you profess that this is God telling us that this is how it works, this is how heaven comes onto earth, if that is what you are professing, and that's what you believe, that's what you have faith in, you can't prove it, you can't quantify it, you can't rationally, logically explain it so that, oh, of course it makes perfect sense. You can't. You cannot do that. I'm not saying you're not allowed to. I'm saying you physically can't. You intellectually cannot explain it. And people will do backwards 360 somersaults to try to fit it into this box of human understanding. You can't. You'd have to listen to what God told us and follow it. That is what faith has been the whole time. And it's hard, and it's scary, and it will severely upset the powers of the world that like the way that humans make decisions because they benefit from it. As soon as you start to turn away from that, meaning the part in the story where things start to get real, then going to a church building on a Sunday with your other friends in, thinking of myself, in the wealthy suburbs where you grew up, and everyone's comfortable and happy, and you don't see any injustice, you don't see any poverty, you don't see the issues in the world, and you can give your collections for the offering or whatever to fix the church roof or something, or support the soccer team going to whatever tournament or something. Like that is what people boil all of this down to. And maybe they can even start to get into wanting to fight for justice and fight for helping people out, and for trying to make the world a better place. But when you get to the real evil of the world, and you are facing the real evil of the world, the real evil of the world is not creating a homeless shelter for people in the inner city who don't have money and don't have a place to stay. That's not combating the real evil in the world. Combating the real evil in the world is when you decide to, it's hard for me to use that same example. Combating the real evil in the world is when you get a huge grassroots movement that is demanding that the government buy all medical debt for everyone in the country. Instead of selling it to collections agencies, the government has to buy it. You will get a massive corporate powers backlash to something like that. It would be God coming down and demanding that we dismantle all U.S. military bases in the world, bring everyone back home. That would disrupt some things. It would be saying that we need to cut our military budget in half and create a welfare to provide people with a basic minimum wage that doesn't follow 2009 standards or something like that. That will disrupt things, and you will start to see how, and I'm not trying to be political here, I don't know politics stuff, I don't know policy. What I do know is God, and what I try to be very, very close to in my thoughts about all this is what God has told us, which is why I want to go through all of the Gospels like this, and I want to see what is Jesus telling us. And just out of curiosity, how does what you could interpret in today's world as a relatively objective, solely intellectual, analytic being of the artificial intelligence think about this? And what does that thing tell us? And so here, I'm sure, I have not read this yet, it's going to tell us that this is one of those moments where the reality of how, the reality of the true battle of good versus evil is not fun, and it's not easy. It is a battle. It's not a battle with guns. It's not a battle with bombs and death. Well, maybe, but it's going to be a battle very similar to, I think the best example of it was the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King. You had nonviolence to the end, which is what Jesus did. In the face of death, imminent death, you do not repay violence with violence. Only love can drive out violence. Only light can drive out the darkness. With that said, who was Jesus? Part 1. Matthew 12 reveals Jesus as the greater reality that the Old Testament symbols merely pointed toward. Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus makes the radical claim that he is Lord of the Sabbath, verse 8. To the Jewish ear, this was a claim to be God, as God was the one who instituted the Sabbath. Greater than the temple and Jonah. He explicitly states he is greater than the temple, verse 6, and greater than Jonah, verse 41. He is the ultimate dwelling place of God and the ultimate prophet, the chosen servant. Matthew quotes a long passage from Isaiah 42, verses 18 through 21, identifying Jesus as the gentle warrior who does not break a bruised reed. He is the king who conquers through humility and justice rather than worldly clamor. Part 2, what was his mission? Jesus' mission is revealed as the restoration of mercy over ritual and the plundering of the strong man's house. Humanity over rule keeping. By healing the man with the shriveled hand on the Sabbath, verse 13, Jesus shows his mission is to prioritize the restoration of the image of God in humans over the legalistic preservation of traditions. The inauguration of the Spirit's power. Jesus explains that he casts out demons by the Spirit of God, which means the kingdom of God has come upon you. Verse 28. His mission is a spiritual invasion to bind the strong man, Satan, and take back what belongs to God. The final ultimatum. He warns of the blasphemy against the Spirit. Verse 31-32. His mission forces people to see the light, to call that light darkness, attributing God's work to Beelzebul, is the ultimate rejection of the only power that can save. Part 3, how should Christians engage with the world today? Matthew 12 offers a template for compassionate subversion. Do good on the Sabbath. Jesus asks, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? Verse 11. Christians are called to prioritize doing good and saving life over maintaining religious appearances or social convenience. The bruised reed policy. Engaging the world shouldn't look like shouting in the streets or crushing the weak. Verse 19-20. It should look like the quiet and gentle restoration of those who are already broken by the world. Fruit-based discernment. Jesus reminds us that a tree is recognized by its fruit. Verse 33. We should not engage with leaders, movements, and ideas based on the character they produce. We should engage with leaders, movements, and ideas based on the character they produce, not the signs or rhetoric they perform. Part 4, Modern America exemplifying Jesus. An example of this is found in whistleblowers of mercy in rigid systems. In modern America, when a person in a corporate or religious hierarchy speaks up to protect a victim, even if it breaks the rules of the organization's branding or traditional protocols, they are acting like Jesus on the Sabbath. Similarly, organizations that provide Sabbath and healing for the bruised reeds of society, the addicted, the traumatized, and the overworked, without requiring them to get their act together, first are living out the Isaiah 42 prophecy highlighted here. Part 5, Modern America, the antithesis. The antithesis is found in weaponized legalism and character assassination. the Pharisee spirit. The Pharisees in this chapter weren't upset that the man was healed. They were upset that it happened incorrectly according to their rules. Verse 10. We see the antithesis today in cancel culture or religious gatekeeping, where the focus is on catching someone in a technical violation of a social or religious code rather than celebrating their growth or restoration. Calling good evil. When political or social tribes become so blinded by us versus them that they attribute a demonstrably good act by their enemy to evil motives, they are verging on the spirit of those who called Jesus' miracles demonic. Transactional family values. Jesus redefines family as whoever does the will of my Father, verse 50. The antithesis is a clannish mindset, prioritizing biological or political kin over the universal call to do what is right and just for all people. Dang. I know I normally end it there. This is very good. I highly recommend people do this and experience this. Just hearing it articulated like this. I want to go back to the part 4, where it says, similarly, organizations that provide Sabbath and healing for the bruised reeds of society, the addicted, the traumatized, and the overworked, without requiring them to get their act together first, are living out the Isaiah 42 prophecy highlighted here. So that Isaiah 42 prophecy, being connected obviously to Jesus talking about Jesus doing the healing on Sabbath. For this thing to use the phrase or to say without requiring them to get their act together first, it hits really close to home. Having grown up in a pretty wealthy environment, with a lot of people that had their act together, and also looked down on those who did not have their act together, and would make political decisions based on the idea that everyone can just get their act together. And it wasn't until much later that I was able to kind of come to the thought, I hope it's correct. Mostly I just hope that it's really in line with Jesus. I came to the understanding that, so thinking secularly, purely, there's a lot of things that get in the way of people getting their act together. There's a lot of things that get in the way of that. Are some of them the fault of the people? Sure. Are some of them the result of things that are completely out of control of the people? Sure. Can you be the judge of who deserves grace and mercy and who does not? To quote Gandalf from the first book of Lord of the Rings. I'm going to paraphrase here, but some that die deserve life and some that live deserve death. Can you give it to them? Can you decide who deserves what and what? Don't be so eager to deal in death and judgment. Even the wisest cannot see all ends. Beautiful, beautiful poetry by Tolkien. And it speaks to this exact moment. Are we going to look at the bruised reed in the world and then take the knowledge of good and evil for ourselves to decide they are evil and undeserving of our grace and our mercy? Or are we going to follow what Jesus explicitly told us to do and trust that whether or not that person deserves help is a question that is beyond us? For us, everyone deserves help. Justice belongs to God. Vengeance belongs to God. The determination of what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil, belongs to God, not to us. We are not able to very justly determine this. We can do a lot. I think we need justice systems. I think we need to try our best. And I think it needs to be in line with what Jesus wants. But oh my God, to withhold aid, which this is a thing, I'm using a very personal example, to withhold aid and help and forgiveness and mercy from people because you don't think they deserve it, or you think that they put themselves into that situation, means you are making yourself God and dangling your mercy over their heads so that they do a trick for you to prove that they deserve it.